Ever since January's deadly terrorist attack on an Algerian gas field, there have been suggestions that at least two of those responsible were Canadian, and that both were killed in a final standoff when Algerian forces moved in on the terrorists. Tonight, after a lengthy CBC News investigation, we can tell you who the Canadians were, where they came from, and why they did it. The answers are surprising and shocking. We begin with the first of our two lead reporters on this story, Adrian Arsenault.
The bloody four-day siege of a gas plant was led by a Canadian.
Coordinated by a Canadian.
A stunning revelation. A Canadian coordinated the assault.
Talk of a Canadian connection started right away, as soon as the panic subsided in that Algerian gas plant in January. As soon as the automatic weapons and RPGs of the 32 attackers fell silent, as soon as the bloodied bodies of 37 hostages were discovered. The Algerian Prime Minister said it openly. He spoke of a Canadian controlling the attack. Then came survivor accounts, the blonde, blue-eyed attacker, the one with unaccented English. Who was it? An RCMP team in Algeria reported last month it found the remains of two Canadians among the dead militants. Who were they? Officials released no names, but tonight, for the very first time, CBC can reveal the identity of the young Canadian terrorists and tell you their unsettling story. It's not what you might expect. Those dead Canadian militants were Ali Medlej of London, Ontario, and Xristos Katsiroubas, also of London. Two young men from a small, safe southern Ontario city. Not strangers, they were high school friends. Both attended London South Secondary, a good school in a good neighbourhood. Ali graduated in 2006. He doesn't appear in high school photos. But Xristos does. He spent several years at school with Ali and left after grade 11. A young man of divorced parents who grew up close to his elementary school in a part of London proud of its neighbourhood watch program. A mix of social housing and large homes with swimming pools. Tolerant and friendly is how friends describe him. But something happened. A friend who wants to remain anonymous says he saw changes in Chris.
He wasn't the same person he was before. I felt he had no motivation or no goal in life. Tried to tell him to, Chris, you really need to get a job. You need to at least do school or something.
At this point, Xristos had converted to Islam. By 2007, someone close to the family told police Chris was hanging around with troublemakers. Xristos and Ali left Ontario for a few months to go find work. They didn't find much, but they did find trouble with the law. Did they fall off the radar? No. By now, CSIS was curious, had questions. In fact, CSIS investigators went so far as to talk with the friends of both Xristos and Ali. So what happened? Where did these young men go? Well, either over the years, CSIS lost track of them, or somehow decided that Xristos and Ali just weren't a threat. In 2009, a friend who saw the now bearded Chris back in London said he was preoccupied.
It was kind of really hard to relate to him at that point. He had other interests. Kept saying, let's go to the mosque, let's go to this center. It wasn't that he wanted to take me there. It was more that he wanted to go there and thought that the couple hours spending with me was probably a waste of time.
He parted ways with Chris, and it wasn't until CSIS started asking questions again last month that the Algerian connection was made. News came first that Ali was among the dead militants. Word about Chris unclear until now. So how did they go from London, Ontario to terrorism in Algeria? Who planted the seed? Some we spoke with say Chris and Ali were drifting until they found their perverse goal, to fight.
They wanted to find a purpose or some kind of, something to do, something to believe in, something to strive for. I guess maybe terrorists or maybe other ideals got to them before we, as Canadians, were able to offer something better.
Not the answer anyone wants to hear, that these kids could be anyone's kids, that they might not be the only ones. This makes the blood in the sand of Algeria heart-stoppingly close. Adrienne Arsenault, CBC News, London, Ontario.
Well, now for more on all this, we're joined by our Ottawa-based investigative correspondent, Greg Weston. Greg, we've been hearing that there could be more than 2 Canadians involved in this story. What do we know about that tonight?
Well, Peter, we can confirm from international intelligence sources that there were at least 2 others who traveled overseas with the 2 that we have named tonight. Also friends from the London area, high school friends. What we don't know, Peter, is whether they were part of the attack on the Algerian gas plant. And, of course, we also don't know whether they are dead or alive.
You know, as we saw in Adrian's report, some indication that CSIS has been tracking at least some of these people for some time. Do we know more on that front?
We certainly do. We know that CSIS made the rounds to some of this duo's friends and family back in 2007 after a family member became concerned and complained to police and to CSIS that their son was hanging around with some people that they thought were pretty dangerous. What we don't know is what CSIS has done since then, and specifically we don't know whether CSIS may have had them under watch at the time that they left for Algeria.
A lot of unanswered questions still on this one. To you, what's the biggest question still to be answered?
Well, Peter, I think like any parent, the biggest question of this is, for me, is how could this possibly happen? CSIS has been warning for quite some time that there are an increasing number of kids who are getting involved in these terrorist organizations, going overseas, getting involved in them, who have no background of that kind at all. There'd be no signs. They come from different ethnic backgrounds, different religious backgrounds, and so they, I hate to use the word, fairly ordinary kids who are in high school, this has got to be really disturbing for a lot of parents.
All right, we'll leave it at that for now. Greg Weston reporting to us tonight from Ottawa.